If it's today's news, it's not news. Maybe if it's not important in a month, it's not news, right? And that's part of that intelligent filtering. And I guess part of the reason that X is dangerous and social media is dangerous, X in particular, is that, that proclivity to forage for information is in general an extremely useful instinct, right? It's the instinct to learn. But what we're learning, you might say that the shorter the period of time over which the information is relevant, the more like pseudo information it is. And so then any system that optimizes for the grip of short-term attention is going to parasitize your learning instinct with pseudo information.
Yeah, it's also...
And the algorithms are going to maximize that.
It seems like increasingly the expiration date on our informational diet is becoming shorter and shorter. I imagine back in the day, before we started living these digital lives, people were probably not selling information as being urgent if it wasn't something that was going to impact you in a deep, meaningful way, which I'm sure for most of our history was probably life and death situations. Barring that, most people were only concerned with their proximal surroundings. What am I going to eat? When am I going to sleep? How am I going to feed my family? These basic life necessities. I mean, think about it. The breaking news that you saw 2 weeks ago, do you even remember what it was? Does it even affect your life in any meaningful way other than the possible anxiety that you felt when you first came across that bit of news? This idea about how our learning instincts are parasitized by pseudo information is such a powerful metaphor. As humans, we've had this healthy, natural drive to acquire new information. It's what has gotten us this far. But what social media does is it hijacks this drive, not to keep us informed, but to keep us hooked. This pseudo information, the hot takes, the outrage clips, the gossip, they're all the addictive, sugary foods that are meant to exploit our desire to learn and to keep us addicted.
Is going to parasitize your learning instinct with pseudo information.
Yeah, so it's also...
And the algorithms are going to maximize that.
The half-life is one thing, but also the culture that is informing these algorithms, the actual human behavior that the algorithms are skimming and boosting is increasingly a bad faith style of conversation. I mean, it's just so many people, especially the anonymous people, are in the misinformation business. I mean, they will just cut together a clip that is designed to mislead, and that is the clip that will get spread to the ends of the earth.
Well, is it designed to mislead, or is it designed to optimize their particular grip on short-term attention for their own aggrandizement? Like the psychopathic move, and let's say that it's facilitated by these short-term attention aggregators that are driven by bots that are learning how to do this. The psychopathic proclivity, the narcissistic proclivity, is going to say whatever puts you at the center of attention, whatever it is. Now, if you're governed by some kind of ethos that is outside of attention seeking, then that's a different story. But if the game is that the machine optimizes for short-term attention, then it's going to reward all the players that are doing whatever it takes to grip short-term attention.
Yeah, but the thing is, people, whatever it takes, though, is to get somebody seeming to say something totally outrageous, and in context, it might have made perfect sense, or at least be a very different point than the one that's being advertised by the clip. But the clip, shorn of context, is calculated to mislead, in that the person who has edited that clip knows that the naive viewer can only draw one conclusion from the utterance as presented, right? And they're not, and that not, even if they're well intentioned and fairly alert alert to this problem, almost no one is going to go back to the original podcast and look at the comment in context. And the person who makes that clip just knows that if they frame it as a smackdown, people are going to love to see that, and it doesn't matter that they're lying about what happened and damaging people's reputations in the process.
If someone makes an hour-long video, all it takes is 10 minutes for someone to go through that video, pick out the most malicious, clickbaity, misleading parts of that video out of context in order to misconstrue that person to the public. So that is a 30-minute video that has been exploited with only 10 minutes of content. And moreover, for someone to fact check the 10-minute video who has no context of the video that's being referenced, they have to go through that 30-minute video in order to get the full context. So by definition, it takes much more effort to uncover the truth than it does to tell lies. This makes the lies so rampant and pervasive, especially in the online environment where you can export them by the second.
Yeah. Well, and that's especially true if they're anonymous and their reputation bears no consequence of their lies. Well, the other thing that's happening, I don't know how much this is happening to you, and this is another example of the parasite problem. So increasingly, my voice and my image are being used not exactly in the way that you're describing, although that's happening a lot.
Yeah, I'm selling cognitive enhancers somewhere as an AI version of myself.
Okay. Well, and that's happening a fair bit too, and sometimes worse than cognitive enhancers. But it's the worst thing that's happening now is that these sites that are operating under my name, using my image and my voice, are providing pseudo-philosophical content and pseudo-psychological insight as if it's me. And so it's like what I've said has been put through a filter of stupidity and reorganized in my voice. And this is happening constantly.
In this online environment where we have anonymity, we are denuding that social contract, which is our reputation. There is no reputation to uphold. And this makes it so much easier for us to feel as though we're going to get away with any bad behavior, and that's okay so long as it benefits us. A less intense version of this play out when we're on the road. I mean, you've probably experienced it yourself where you're flicking someone off for the most trivial thing in a way that you would never do if you actually saw this person and if you actually saw that person in person. That sounds redundant, but you get the point here. So in that example, the car is offering this psychological buffer that makes you feel like you have no reputation to uphold. And until you're face to face with that person, you're probably not as concerned with how that person is going to receive it or what that would imply for your own reputation as you might be.
Like, YouTube has already taken 65 channels down that are doing this. And so this is another example of that parasite problem, right? You store up a reputation and then the parasites swoop in and pull off the attention that the reputation has garnered and monetize it. And they can escape into the ether because they do it anonymously. And so this is going to become a stunning problem.
I mean, it's a big problem. I can see that the perfect version of it is at most a year away. I mean, it might only be a couple of months away. We've experimented with this on our side too. Just like, for instance, in my meditation app, Waking Up, we're now experimenting with translation to other languages, and they've got AI's got me speaking 22 languages perfectly in my voice, and it really sounds like me speaking those languages. And the translation, from what we can tell so far, is fairly impeccable. So we're going to roll out a Spanish version of the app in the not too distant future, just to see what happens. But it's like it's getting too good.
There are two kinds of digital impersonation that are relevant here. One is the fraud and then the other is the corruption. The fraud is the old school way of taking someone out of context, putting the most uncharitable spin on a take that they indeed made, but is very misleading and unrepresentative of that person's views. This is something that has been done for as long as the internet has been around, probably even before that. And it's only supercharged by AI. And then we have the corruption, which is, I would say, by and large, a creation of our generative AI capabilities, where now you can have someone, the likeness of someone, to be saying or doing things online that they actually never said. They have views that they never espoused, they would never have espoused. So the corruption is so much worse because not only is it stealing the person's identity, but it is also corrupting the entire body of work that that person has created, making it so much more difficult for newcomers and even people who might already be familiar with that work to have a complete misconstrual of what that person stands for, or what their views are on that topic, on any given topic.
What happens, but it's like it's getting too good. So I think what the lesson that consumers of information who care to have real information are going to have to learn is that you can't trust, if you're looking at Jordan Peterson on YouTube, you simply cannot trust that it really is Jordan Peterson unless it's coming through one channel that you can trust, which is, so now we're back to the age of ironically, we're back to the age of gatekeepers, right? It's
Yeah,
like if
yeah,
it's not on
right,
your
absolutely.
channel or Joe Rogan's channel or Chris Williamson's channel, if it just purports to be them but on somebody else's YouTube account, you can't trust it.
And this brings us to the great irony: gatekeepers. The internet promised us a decentralized environment where people can freely express their views and sunlight will be the best disinfectant. Away from the old gatekeepers who had so much power to control the narratives. I think a lot of that had to do with the finitude of the old media, where you could only have so many players in a space at a given time, right? For all of these media companies, they had physical locations, they had to hire a certain amount of people, right? There was this cap that they all had that made competition to be constrained by these physics. But with the introduction of the digital environment, there is no more of a cap on gatekeepers. It's essentially non-existent anymore. In order to thrive in this environment, you have to be as open gate as possible, because you're in competition with a million other gatekeepers who are more than willing to allow access to whatever it is that you're selling, informationally speaking. And to filter or to add any moderation to your content is inherently going to limit the amount of profits that you're making in the long run. It's going to limit your ability to grab attention. It's going to limit your ability to grow. So even the best of these platforms, the most scrutinized of these platforms, have so much on there that is at best manipulative and deceptive, and at worst actually harmful, whether we're talking about mentally or physically. The anxiety inducing strains, or the inciting of violence strains, or the indoctrination strains, these are all things that have been made possible, or at least significantly amplified, by the advent of the new media that we now enjoy, if I can use that word.
But on somebody else's YouTube account, you can't trust it.
Yeah. Well, it might also be, Sam, that the real solution to that is payment. Like if it's the rule is going to be, maybe this is the rule. The rule is going to be,
all
if
my
it's
stuff is
free,
paywall. Yeah.
right? If it's free, it's a lie.
Right. Yeah.
That's the world we're rapidly moving into. And or if it's
except someone's going to be able to create, I mean, until you find them and stop them, someone will create the fake Jordan Peterson Academy that has a paywall, right? That looks like you, sounds like you, and it's only $5 a month, and so they'll monetize that way, and that'll still be the problem.
I like how they both agreed with that idea for a second just before Sam Harris poked a hole into it. But there's yet another hole to be poked into it that I'll be talking about in a second. On the surface, that sounded like a good idea because information, truthful information, costs time and money, both to create or to verify. So it would seem to make sense that if something is behind a paywall, then there must be some authenticity to it. But as Sam Harris said, bad actors are just as likely to start their own forms of subscription services to continue on with their scams. If the only difference between truth and untruth is a paywall, then that's quite a simple fix for these scammers, is simply put that paywall in front of theirs too. I'm sure some of them might be happy to even charge more than the the creators themselves. But even if we were to assume that were true, perhaps there is some way to salvage that idea of a paywall. We still run into yet another problem, which is a sort of class-based information system. If you're rich, you get high quality, verifiable information. And if you're poor, you're just relegated to scams and frauds and all kinds of misinformation out there. As you can tell, that is no world that any of us want to live in, to have a population of poorer people who are being fed misinformation that is isolated from what everybody else who has a bit of money is consuming.
And it's only $5 a month, uh, and so they'll monetize that way, and that'll still be the problem.
Has
So
that been happening with your meditation app, with your enterprise yet?
not that I'm aware of.
That's
No, I mean I just think I'm just aware of seeing short clips of me uh, seeming to hawk you know uh, psychotropics that I've never heard of. And it's just like
right,
an
right,
AI
right.
version of my voice. It's real footage of me stolen from somebody's podcast, and then an AI workover of that, that turns into like an Instagram ad.
Yeah, well, I talked to some lawmakers in DC about a year and a half ago about the fact that this was going to happen, hoping that they would. Well, it takes a long time to take notice and takes action, but it's essentially it's the digital equivalent of kidnapping. Like, I think people should be put in prison for a long time for stealing your digital identity and monetizing it. Like, it is very much akin to kidnapping, because what they're doing is they're draining the value out of your reputation. That's essentially the game.
A lot of this conversation has revolved around the old style of gatekeeping and the obvious benefits that conferred on our informational diets, in spite of the narratives that were so easily controlled by those traditional gatekeepers. But I think there is a way to thread this needle. I don't think we need to go back to the old gatekeepers, and neither do I think we need to settle for the overwhelming hole that is the internet today. I can imagine something like a cryptographic signature or some sort of digital watermarking that makes it possible for the actual creators, the originals, to be able to certify that this came from them. I don't think that should be too difficult. I've also heard some noises on how blockchain technology seems to target that very problem of decentralized but authentic content. And I'm pretty sure that it's not a lack of capability that we have at the moment, but rather a lack of interest. Perhaps the age of AI would usher us into that new frontier in our online world, where we finally figure out ways to make the information more robust, more credible. And we finally find ways to hold people more accountable for the misinformation that they put out there, or at least disincentivize it, make it a little less easier for it to just keep brimming over. Now, of course, this will set us up for yet another arms race between the verification technology and the people trying to break that technology, who themselves might be different from the scammers who will then take that technology and scam people and do what they do. But I do think that is a better position to be in. I don't think there's any solution that's not going to come with growing pains at best, or a constant struggle and an iterative process to keep it working, right? And I think that is a much better world to live in than one with either no guardrails or too many guardrails, as we had with the older gatekeepers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these ideas. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.